Hello, I am Connagh Tonkinson, a London-based musical director. I graduated from the University of York on the music degree in 2018, and that makes me feel very old. Yeah, I've been asked to answer some questions for you guys, so let's jump straight into it. So the first one is, what skills are most important for a musical director? And I guess the answer to that one really depends on what jobs you are doing as a musical director, because the role itself encompasses so many different roles and so many other roles. So for example, I work as a musical director, as an assistant musical director, as a vocal coach, as a pianist in shows, as a rehearsal pianist just for the rehearsal period, as an arranger, as an audition pianist, as a workshop leader, as a teacher. There's also typesetting and score preparation, arranging, orchestration, all that kind of thing, and conducting, obviously. So it really depends on what kind of jobs you are doing as a musical director. So I guess I'll answer this question purely on my experience. So what skills are most important for me as a musical director is, the first one is sight reading. Most of my income and most of my work is actually audition pianist, so I do Six, the West End, the UK tour and the cruises. I've done Rent recently that was just up at the Hope Mail. I do bits and bobs. I've dipped in on Phantom Les Mis, all of that lot. So that's probably the most important one for me, is sight reading. Other skills that are important as an MD, kind of having confidence and being able to lead rehearsals and being able to communicate with people. Communication is probably one of the biggest skills, actually, because you have to deal with, you're kind of, once the show is going, you're the only person that's on the creative team, really, that still deals with the cast and the rest of the production team. So you have to be able to communicate between the two, and sometimes you have to be able to put your foot down to the cast, and also then, on behalf of the cast, put your foot down to the production team. So communication is probably a really, really important skill. Next on the questions is top 3 tips for leading a rehearsal. Okay, so like I said earlier, communication is key. When you're leading a rehearsal for a group of performers, you've got to be able to get the result that you want as quickly as you can, because, so for example, for the last 2 shows that I've just finished at a drama school in Guildford, I had 4 days to teach the whole show, the whole music, all of the music, and that's, for Pippin, that was 300 plus pages of music, and I had 4 days to do that in. Obviously the cast knew what they were doing already because they're professionals, but yeah, I've got to be able to get the result that I want in a really, really short amount of time a lot of the time. So communication is huge. Other tips for leading rehearsals: turn up knowing what you're doing. It's not the kind of thing, especially at a professional level and the standards that I work to and the standard that we work to in the industry, it's not the kind of thing that you can just turn up and go, oh yeah, I can just sight read this and we'll make it work and it's fine, because that takes up extra time. Your sight reading might be incredible, like I can get through most things sight reading, that's fine, and I can teach most things through sight reading, absolutely fine. But you may not notice that because you're sight reading, because this is the first time you are digesting it, 1, you'll miss things, and 2, you won't get the result that you want as quickly as you need to. It all kind of comes back to being able to get a great result in a short amount of time, really. Last top tip for leading a rehearsal. Be brave, I guess. It can be quite daunting, especially as like a young musical director who's still, I know I've done West End stuff and I've done whatnot, but I'm still breaking into the industry. A lot of the time I have to deal with people that are much further along in their career than I am, so the director of Saturday Night Fever show I've just done was a guy called Matt Cole, who's just been nominated for an Olivier for his work on Fiddler on the Roof, and the director for Pippin was a girl called Alexandra Sumner Hughes, and she's the resident director on Waitress. So these are all like really, really important people in the industry, and I've got to make sure that I can do my job without being blinded by the fact that I'm working with celebrities in my industry, if that makes sense. So yeah, be brave, be willing to take an extra step, and don't be afraid to put what your thoughts are forward just because you're working with people that are further along in their career than you. What's my favourite warm-up? Actually, this is a strange one because it's not going to be an answer that people are expecting. It's not not really a vocally answer at all. My favourite part of a warm-up actually is warming up your body and stretching, and I guess this is vocalising, but like sirening and using a thing called primal sounds, which we talk about a lot in the industry, which is sounds that you make as a baby, essentially. Because, fun fact, babies are the best belters. They're constantly going, "Wah!" and it doesn't hurt their voices at all. So this is the kind of stuff that I love doing in a warm-up, and it's the stuff that normally makes the performers go, "Oh, I can actually sing quite high, safely." And I think it's super important, as we all know, to stretch and be ready to perform, and it's a big thing that I hone in on in my as a musical director, is being ready and able to perform. I love a good lie on the floor for 3 minutes listening to some orchestral piece with your eyes closed, ready to focus on the rehearsal that we're about to go into. It's one of my favourite things. Next question. How did you find moving to London? I love London. Anyone that knows me knows that I am in love with this place. It's the best place to be, especially if you want to be in the musical theatre industry. I actually found it super easy. I live with 3 other University of York graduates, and we put 2 of them in charge of finding a house, which they did. I was obviously still up in York, and they were closer to London, so they could do all of that. The move itself wasn't stressful. Everything was pretty much sorted. I turned up on the Friday, unpacked Saturday, Sunday, probably got a little bit drunk. And then this kind of leads on to the next question. I'd actually started work on my first gig on the Monday. So yeah, moving to London was great. I love it here. Highly recommend it for anyone that wants to be in the industry. Yeah. What was the first opportunity you had after leaving university? So I kind of already touched on this, but I moved on the Friday. I moved down to London on the Friday with no jobs, no prospects. That sounds horrible. But I had no jobs lined up. I knew people, but I obviously wasn't in London, so I didn't know them well. I'd met people like once or twice, maybe. But I got down on Friday. I saw a tweet of someone looking for a musical director for a show. Got in touch, had a phone call, had a met up for coffee back in the days when we were allowed to meet up for coffee. Had a chat through the show, all that kind of stuff, and then started rehearsals the week after. So I was very lucky that I managed to get a job in my first 3 days of being in London. And that was just a little show called The Feeling at the studio area in the other, what's it called? The Other Palace, which is now an Olivier recognised West End theatre. How exciting. So my first job was actually quite exciting. I loved it, and I've been super lucky ever since that I haven't really stopped working. I kind of moved here as someone that nobody knew, and since then I've done things at the Other Palace, I've done things for companies like the British Theatre Academy, I've done shows at Arts Ed, I've done shows at PBA, I've worked at Erdang, all these different places. I was super lucky that within August, September, October, November, 4 months of me being there, I was associate musical director on a 48-hour production of a West End show, Singing in the Rain, at the Adelphi, which is where Waitress was and Back to the Future is going to be. So yeah, I was just super, super lucky. And then all of that period from November to December, January, I took over as MD on a tour of a show called The Season, which is a fantastic Christmas show. And then straight after that, I finished that show on the Friday, and on Monday I was straight into rehearsals for Panto. And the pantomime company was a company called Prime Pantomimes, who were set up by Cellar Door, who do the Bring It On UK tour, 9 to 5 on the West End, all that kind of thing. So as I'm speaking, you'll probably realise that the whole industry is kind of intertwined. So I was doing a pantomime that was produced by a company that was doing loads of other West End shows. So as soon as I do that show, I'm then in for all of this other stuff because they know me, if that makes sense. So yeah, my first opportunity was that little show at the other Palace Studio Theatre, but that opportunity just kind of led everywhere else. It wasn't a particularly like flashy, fantastic show, but it's just because I had done something. I could say, here I am, I've been here 4 days and I've done a show. Next question is, how would you recommend young musicians finding opportunities? This is a tricky one because obviously I can only talk for the musical theatre industry. As a performer, as in as a singer, someone on the stage, realistically, you kind of have to go to drama school and you have to have the experience of being in drama school. Mainly because you can't really get the training that you get at a drama school anywhere else in the country. I know lots of people that have tried, and there are obviously some success stories of people that haven't been to drama school, but realistically, that is your way in as a singer, as a dancer, as an actor. And then from there, it's all about meeting people. It's horrible to think that the industry is mainly about connections and mainly about making friends, but it is. Obviously, human nature, I am more likely to recommend a musical director for a job that I know well than someone that I don't. So that's kind of how that fits in, and it is a really important thing to do. In terms of musicians, as in playing an orchestral instrument or a pianist or whatever in the musical theatre industry, it's actually super difficult. Because for big West End shows, you have a person who's called a fixer, and that fixer just picks what musicians he wants or she wants. So they will just pick who they want to pick from a pool of pretty much everyone, as long as they're not already on a show. So as a musician, not as a musical director and not as a acting, dancing, singing performer, in order to get those jobs, you have to make yourself known to the fixers, to the musical supervisors, to the musical directors, because if I know you, I can recommend you for jobs. Likewise, if I know you, I can use you for something that I'm doing that's not a West End show, for example. So there are a few musicians from York I know really well that I've asked to do gigs with me. And then obviously I ask people to come and see those shows, and then they'll go, oh, who was the saxophonist on this show? Who played trumpet on this show? And then I can be like, oh, it's this person, and then it leads on for you. So it's just about building up on a ladder, really. Kind of in the same way that you do as a musical director. However, as a musical director, a lot of the time I need an MD in 20 minutes, can you be there? So it's really, really tricky. It's super hard to explain. If you ever have any questions about it, please feel free to email me. I'll make sure the Opera Society put my email on there if you want to get in touch and chat, because I love it. What do you recommend for singers trying to get into the London scene, whether opera or musical theatre? Okay, so this is kind of the same thing. If you're not at drama school, go to drama school, even if you just do an MA after your degree. Again, this is because you don't get that kind of training anywhere else. Obviously, natural talent is a huge thing. But once you've been to drama school, then it's about getting an agent. And the good thing about drama school is that is probably the best way to get an agent, because you will always have a showcase that agents will go and see. They get free tickets to go and see. And that they will just fill their books with people that they've seen, essentially. And then once you've got an agent, what happens is they will put you in for things. And then you turn up to the audition and you go through round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth, and then you get the job, or you don't get the job. The biggest thing that if you're trying to break into the London scene, or just the MT scene in general, is that you've got to be brave and you've got to have thick skin, because you will get rejected so many times. Like, my CV is quite huge, considering the fact that I've only really been here for 6 months worth of working time because of the coronavirus and lockdown. But I'm sure on the flip side of that, if I wrote a CV of all the jobs that I didn't get, that would be much bigger. The good thing about me is that when I get a rejection, instead of going, oh no, I didn't get it, I'm just like, right, fine, cool, let's see what else I can get, if that makes sense. So yeah, you've got to be brave, you've got to be able to put yourself out there, you've got to have a vocal reel, you've got to get on Spotlight, you've got to, if you can have a dance reel, if you didn't go to drama school, that would be great. And you just need to know who all the people are. So you need to know, like, Felicity French, Paul Weller, James Pearson, Rosie Pearson, all the casting directors, Jim Arnold. You need to know all of these people so that you know what you're looking for and you know who casts all of these shows and what they like and all that kind of thing. It's just about knowing your industry, really. Obviously, you need to be good, but I can't do anything about that in a masterclass like this. But yeah, good. How important are the connections you made at York? Okay, so I don't know how well you know the music department at York, probably quite well because you're all going to be there, but the music department at York don't really have a musical theatre. They don't like musical theatre, essentially. It's not necessarily that they don't appreciate it or don't understand it or whatever it is, they just don't really teach musical theatre at all. It's not a thing that they do. And that's fine, they don't have to. They love their Baroque music, they love their early music, choral singing, orchestral playing, all that kind of stuff. Totally fine. However, so in my third year of university, I probably spent 5 or 6 weeks down in London over the course of the academic year. And throughout that time, I would go and sit in on shows, I would go and meet all the musical directors, all of the musical supervisors, all of the orchestrators, arrangers, and I'd go and buy them a drink, I'd go and say hi, introduce myself. And that's probably the most important thing, and that's the main reason that I kind of already had a base here before I moved down, a little bit, in that I wasn't a complete newbie. So the connections I made whilst I was at York were great, fantastic, that's what you should be doing. The connections that I made because of York are non-existent, and that's totally fine. Then the university is not required to give you connections in that sort of way. You have to take the responsibility onto yourself as a performer, as an MD, as whatever you are, to go and make those connections. The university would have no money if they got someone in every single day to make sure they got every single little compartment of a music degree, if that makes sense. So making connections is super, super important. Don't expect your university to do them for you, because they won't. Unless you go to drama school, then you just naturally get to meet loads of connections, because you'll work on a show with really big directors, and you'll work on shows with musical directors that you get to meet, and people will come and visit and do classes. Yeah, so you have to work hard for that bit, unfortunately. And the last question is advice for auditions. Again, this depends on what we're talking about, but as an actor, singer, dancer, know your repertoire inside and out. Turn up with your repertoire looking presentable. So, for example, if you've got sheet music, which you should always take to an audition, obviously, because the pianist is going to need it, it needs to look good. It needs to look like an actual score. You would not believe the amount of times that we get like transpositions of songs that are in, I don't know, that are in like C flat major, that have got the bass clef as a treble clef and all the lines overlapping and all that kind of thing, and like littered with double sharps and double flats. You just need to make sure that your music is actually legible, because obviously, I mean, my sight reading is pretty good. A lot of the musical directors who work as audition pianists have really good sight reading, but realistically, if you're going to put a piece that's 144 BPM in C flat major with 7,000 double sharps and half a dozen double flats, it's not really sight readable. You'd be much easier to just put it in B major, and it'd be great. If that makes sense. It's just having a little bit of thought about these kind of things. When you go into the audition room, present yourself as yourself. You're not auditioning, unless you are auditioning for a role. Like the first round of auditions are normally just open calls, essentially, and you can sing what you want. Present yourself as yourself, because we want to see what you are like. It's not about you're auditioning for Les Mis, so you come in dressed as Cosette. Like, that's not the kind of thing that you would do, or that we would want you to do. We just want to see what you can do. The main thing with auditions is that your aim is just to get through round one, because after round one you normally get put on material, so you'll be singing stuff from the show, and from that point on it's up to the panel as to whether they like the way you sing that material. So just getting through round one is the most important thing. Again, you need to have thick skin, because you are going to get rejected a lot of the time. So many performers, like huge performers, I know people like Lucy Jones gets rejected all the time from things, especially before she made it as a big performer. Like, rejection is normal, it happens. You just have to be able to accept that as a performer. Other advice for auditions: be polite, be nice, be kind. Sometimes we audition, so for 6, sometimes I audition from 9 AM until 6 PM, and we'll have a lunch break and maybe 2 10-minute breaks in all of that time. So you might be the 34th person that I've played Heart of Stone for on that day. So don't be offended if I'm sat here like, well, I'm tired, or if I yawn, or if I check my phone while you're having a chat with the director or whatever, because we're all human. We all have the attention span that we have, and after 34 times of playing the same song through, I'm tired, essentially. So just don't be put off by things like that, because it never means that you're not going to get the job, because if you do an incredible job, you're going to go through to the next round. That's kind of just how it works, even if we're tired, even if you're tired. You have to leave your baggage at the door. Don't come in. It's hard. Don't come in being like, oh my god, I nearly got run over by a bus. I'm so dramatic. It's just great. The tube was late and I was delayed, so I ran here. It's just not. It's not the kind of thing that you do in an audition. You turn up, you're professional. You tell us your name. You tell us, or we tell you what we want you to do, and you do it. And then you go, and everything's great. Other advice for auditions. I've already said know your rep. Oh yeah, especially in first rounds. If you bring in a song, I didn't plan it from Waitress, but you've also got no one else from The Great Comet in your rep, there's every chance that once I've heard you sing that, I will be like, hi, can we just do some of this as well? So if you don't want to sing it, don't put it in your rep folder, because there's every chance that I will turn around and say, actually, I want you to sing it. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to give the Opera Society a copy of my CV so you can see what kind of stuff that I do as a musical director, and how it all kind of works. If anybody has any more questions at all, please get in touch. My email will be on this post. And yeah, thank you very much.